Hi guys, welcome back to Two Worlds Collide podcast. On today's episode, we have a special 2024 recap. First off, thank you to everyone who tunes in every week. Your support has been incredible and means the world to me. In this special episode, we're looking back at some of my favourite moments from the year, powerful stories, raw conversations, and unforgettable guests. Sit back and enjoy as we celebrate an amazing year of Two Worlds Collide podcast. I hope you guys enjoy. Ryan Fox, episode 7.
Some for the better, some for the worse, I think. Like, people often ask you, like, you know, I think it's a good question, like, what's the one thing you learned out of the military, or what's the one thing you've taken away? And I think I know what I'm capable of, you know, which is pretty heavy, dude. Like, you know what you can do.
In terms of physical?
Yeah, in terms of mental.
Yeah.
You know, because as you know, in some of your endurance stuff, like, you know, when no one's getting fed and no one's getting watered and everyone's body's breaking down, like, are you going to stop?
You know where you can go.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's the one thing and you can tap into that, right?
Yeah.
You can use that in other parts of your life, whether it's a tough workout here or, I don't know, maybe you got an office job, mate, and you're fucking pushing paper all day. You're a bean counter. I don't know. How many beans can you count? Maybe you can count another 1,000, right?
Yeah. It's a very, very good point you bring up there about capabilities, not knowing what you're capable of, because I think I can push myself further than most other people that I know, apart from some of my military friends. I think they can push themselves to the same boundaries that I can, but there's other friends of mine that are non-military that I don't think it can push there because they've probably never been to those areas before. And then
for a long period of time, right?
Yeah.
Where you're in that zone for sometimes days.
And yeah, probably, you know, that's probably what drives me to run long distances, because there's something about that zone as well that I a little bit enjoy getting to that zone of just that exhaustion, and you know, you just got to keep pushing further, and it's just the mental game of getting there and then staying in that then finishing something off that there's some bit of enjoyment for me out of it. Obviously different to an Afghanistan one where there's not stuff happening, but it's in the middle of a race and I'm at exhaustion and I enjoy it.
100%. Yeah, I like that. It's good.
Ross Nihill, episode 21.
So yeah, they break you physically now. So you've mentally been broke the whole way through, but now they break you physically with the yomping 25 miles a day, every day.
Yeah.
And then you start your commando test then. The first one is a 9-mile speed march. So it's basically webbing, rifle, boots, and you got to do 9 miles in 90 minutes over terrain.
Okay.
So it's 10-minute miles, but you're in webbing, rifle, and boots.
Which is miles in, what's that, it's about 15K. It's 4 to 14K.
Yeah.
90 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's still moving.
It's still moving, and it's not just go for it. You've got to do it synchronized with your troop. So you basically run the flats, run downhill, and speed march uphill. So your webbing's 21 pounds, and then your rifle, and obviously boots, which is a lot different to running in runners.
Definitely.
So that's your first commando test. And then the second one is the endurance course. So the endurance course is 2 miles of like tunnels, crawling through mud.
Like an obstacle course.
Yeah, but it's more like lots of tunnels, and some of the tunnels are fully submerged in water. So again, people that are claustrophobic do not get through this.
Yeah.
So you full tunnels, mud pits. So it's 2 miles of that, and then a 4-mile run back to base, and then a shooting sort of situation, live fire.
Yeah.
So that's your second commando test. And then from that, you go on to the Tarzan assault course, which is an extra long obstacle course. So there's the normal bottom field one, and then they add the Tarzan. So it's like high rope. So everything's 30 foot above ground as well, not harnessed in or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that adds a little bit of spice to it as well. And then the final commando test
is the notorious stomp.
Is the 30 miler in 7 hours over Dartmoor, which is just like that.
Yeah.
And then you finish that, and you get the clap across the bridge, and you get presented your Green Beret, and that's you. Livingston Commando, done and dusted.
Is that when you finished that? What was it? Was it like a massive bit of relief that you'd earn your Green Beret?
It was good. It was very much like you think you're the top of the world.
Yeah, and then you get brought back down when you go to the union.
And then you have your march out on the Friday, and then the Monday you turn up to your commando unit, and it's very much back to the very bottom.
John Dixon, episode 22. they read out some pretty crazy stats at the end of that movie where around 5 to 7.5 million kids per year are trafficked.
It's wild.
The number one destination where they're trafficked into, now I don't know how theoretically real this is or the information backing up the movie, but it does say at the end that the number one destination they're trafficked back into was the United States of America, which again made the open border policy look like shit. And when Trump was in office, he had instant DNA testing for anyone crossing the border with a kid, so they could automatically know that if they were related.
Yep.
Now, the day that the Biden office came in, they took that DNA testing away.
Crazy.
So anyone can walk over with a kid and be fine. And no one's going to ask any questions of why is that kid with a male that they may not look anything alike.
Yeah, that's
now,
right.
Which obviously can increase the likeliness of kids being trafficked across the border into America.
Yep.
Which I just find so inhumane to a level which actually angers me a little bit. But a lot of people don't realise that this happens all around the world, and they say that the child human trafficking trade is vastly becoming bigger than the drug trade.
Human trafficking is the biggest commodity trafficked on earth, or humans are the biggest commodity trafficked on earth at the moment.
Yeah, and we're still in a time where there's still slaves around the world as well.
It's crazy.
But a lot of people don't realise this.
Yeah.
Because we live in the Western world of the bubble where it's just, kids don't get taken.
Yep.
But they do all around the world.
Most definitely, yeah.
All the time. And they're sold into slavery, they're sold into sex trafficking rings. Yep. And once they're done with them in this movie, it also says that, once a kid becomes used too many times, they'll generally cut it open and use it for parts and sell it for organ parts, which is absolutely crazy. But look, I know that you sort of understand that world as well, so I just want to get your sort of thoughts on it. I know we spoke off air before, so what you can say, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I guess in recent years I've been more exposed to it. I would watch that movie. I've watched that movie as well, and face value up until I've always known it happens, right? But up until a few years ago, I probably didn't have a great handle on it, and I explored the idea of going into that field myself, but it was probably something for a multitude of reasons I won't get into here. Not something that I can do presently, but because of that, I know a fair few people now that are involved in that area,
rescuing
these kids, and particularly in the sex trade industry. And it's much bigger than what I thought. It's much bigger. Even you read those stats on the thing, and it sort of doesn't resonate a heap with me. You just sort of your brain sort of goes, that can't be right. Those amount of people can't be getting trafficked unnoticed. Yeah. But then you speak to these guys and girls that are working in this area and liberating these kids, and all across the globe in the craziest of places and with the craziest stories of how they these people that are trafficking humans are dangerous and they're paranoid. So you imagine the people that have to go in and try and figure this out and be successful at getting these kids out. Their stories are incredible, and it's just ongoing, and there's no money in it. There's barely any money in it for the people.
There's no money supporting it to stop it.
Yeah. I mean, you could say, they had a couple of million donated to them last year, but the amount of people in it, it's just not enough. So the guys and girls that are working it are probably getting paid, or they are getting paid stuff all for what they're doing. Actually getting paid stuff all, not for what they're doing, just stuff all in general. It's just the money's not there. The people aren't there. I think I said to you before, I think I read something about 5,000 to 8,000 police globally are designated to human trafficking. So we're talking millions of people, and there's only 5,000 to 8,000 police over the globe,
that are working on stopping the industry.
Yeah, so they're professional, full-time people. So it's such a small number, and you'd have to fact check that number, but it is within that realm. And then, so the only other answer is all these other groups, organisations that go and try and do it, and they're just relying on money from donations. So if people don't believe that it's a problem,
So you got a Democratic Party selling it that it's, or left wing people selling it that it doesn't exist and not a problem. Who's donating, right? It should be like, once you get down into the numbers of it and you hear some of the stories, and like these friends of mine are just constantly on the move, like they're constantly working. It's not like, I can't describe how big it is. Like, and once you get down to it, like it should be like the Globe's almost primary focus. Like it's much worse than anything else. Like that's going on. Like but still it'll get sold as like for a political gain. It'll get sold as like falsehoods or whatever. Like it's wild, mate.
Yeah, and that's what I found most disgusting about it. And that's when I really turned. Because I was quite, and I've said this on a podcast before. I was quite middle to left leaning. You know, like I had that thought about the world, and when they came out and said that after I watched the movie and after I did the fact check, and the movie followed a guy, and that was a real story, and you read his bio, and he has all the evidence there. I read that, and then they said that, and I'm like, I'm done with this side. I can't support a side. I don't care what their other policies are. Yeah, if they're going to come out and openly say that movie is a right wing conspiracy theorist movie, then call me right wing. Because that's the side I'm on. Because, and they have some like really confronting sayings in that movie, like you can only use a bag of cocaine once. But you can use a kid multiple times.
That's right, yeah.
So that's why the industry is becoming so much bigger than the drug industry, because one kid could use you for years. And then when that kid is done, they kill him, open up their parts and sell them.
Yeah. Or they just, like a lot of them too, from what I've heard and observed, is that they just end up in the adult sex trade. So they just go from kids. Now they might not be working for the same master, but they are either working for another one, or they are, or they're just still like, they're so bent, like that's their only value that they see that they've got.
Yeah. Well, that's all they've known as well.
That's right, yeah.
And they're probably addicted to drugs. That's the only way they can get jobs. That's the only way they can feed their addiction.
Yep. And also I think like with those...
And they've probably they've been forced to being addicted to drugs. That's what I'm trying to say as well.
Yeah, they're forced to be addicted to drugs.
Because they would have been hooked up to them early when they got in when they would have been taken.
Yeah, that's right.
To get into the initial trade, they would have been doped up and shit like that.
Yeah, particularly as they get older too, they need to be subdued more. It's a crazy, but like, then I think the grotesqueness of like just how bad it gets too, like people don't understand, like, they might have a picture in their head of a 10-year-old or something like that. Like it's babies as well. Like it's like 2-year-olds like being like fully molested not molested, like rape by like full-grown men, like and like being sold by their own dads and stuff like that. And I'm referencing a particular story, like a particular case that a friend of mine worked on. And this kid was just sold over and over and over, like from about a year to 2 years. He was at 2 years old when they liberated him, saved him, but over that year, like that's what he was sold for. Like it was just sex with men. Like if you've ever held a baby or had a kid, or you've got common sense, like that just doesn't work, right? Like so, it's real hectic stuff, and particularly even in the Philippines, there's like snuff stuff as well. Like it goes right from it's just incredible. Any type of worst nightmare scenario you can think of, it's everything in between as well. Like it's crazy. It is crazy that it's like being ignored.
Matthew French, episode 23.
Me and Milo got along really well. Out of the three boys, him and me got along really well. He's an older digger, older soldier, kids at home, dry. Yeah, I love that type of mentality. Yeah, we just ridicule each other. Yeah, I'd call him an old prick. He'd call me a young prick. Even though I wasn't too young.
Friendship bullying.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I remember he was sitting at the head of the table and he said to me, what are you doing, you dry old, you young prick or something. I said, shut up, you dry old C word. I won't say it on your podcast, mate. A bit of banter. And I remember turning my back and walking up back to the front of the patrol base and then just real quickly. I remember very first instant as I turn around, just for that split second, I thought, who's got fireworks on them?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. As I'm turning around with my rifle, there's just boys diving all over the table, yelling and screaming. I get on a knee, scan. By this time, the firing had sort of stopped. I put my rifle up into the guard tower. What I knew was I had to get round sound range, so I ended up laying 7 rounds into the guard tower right above where the boys were. So there was a guard tower right there where it's just happened, guard tower directly across from them, a guard tower behind my back at the front of the entrance there. I'm thinking, shit, did the fire come from there? Guys are screaming, yelling. At this stage, there's no firing at the moment. So I start thinking, shit, did it come from that tower? Shit, did it come from the tower behind me? So I hugged the HESCO wall, put my foot in the razor wire across the front of the base. So I'm sort of protected from my shoulder from the tower there. Then I'm looking at both guard towers, constantly waving. And then Skip starts numbering off my section commander. Yeah. And I remember him running down, big boy Skip is. Respect him so much. I'm running over, Frenchie. And I go, yep. He goes, come on, we're going to clear these guard towers. So him and me went and cleared the guard tower directly across. They wouldn't get out. We had to get our interpreter. We were pretty aggressive to them. Yeah, at this stage, I don't quite know what's happened, even though it's only about 5 to 10 metres away from me. I've been fixated on the towers.
You're busy.
I'm busy. There's a lot of yelling and screaming. I can hear the radio over my SIG just calling in, 9-liners. Yeah. And we get the guard towers. We get the Afghans out of those guard towers. They get put down to the end of the patrol base, okay? And what we have now is, at this stage, I don't know how many are hit, but we all know now, but plus we're manning the 3 guard towers, so almost combat ineffective when you think about it. And there's 200 Afghans on the patrol base, and it's 9:45, 10 o'clock at night. It's dim, it's dark. We don't know where the threat came from, whether it was inside the base or it was something somehow outside the base. Just chaos. Yeah. Absolute chaos. I remember the helicopter started coming in, so my position was get up, make sure my rifle's pointing at the front of the patrol base. And this is when it started really kicking in for me, like the adrenaline's pumping and everything. I can see the boys working hard. Helicopter comes in, couldn't land in patrol base. It had to land outside. At this stage, the boys were relaxing. None of them had shoes on. Yeah, we were relaxing. I know there was a lot of drama. Why weren't we wearing body armour the whole night? They can go eat a dick, to be honest with you.
They don't understand.
Yeah, they don't understand at all. The only one that was in body armour at the time was me, but by this stage, some of the boys had put body armour on and stuff like that. I remember the boys running out, stretcher right in front of me, and because they were barefoot, you know the terrain over there, desert, sharp rocks. One of the boys tripped at the front. Milo fell off the stretcher. I knew. I knew.
Yeah.
And then the next stretcher went past me. And then the next stretcher went past me. You knew what happened. The boys are covered in blood. It's a quite chaotic scene.
Scott Ryder, episode 26.
But anyway, so this was, I think, the 4th night of these reverse cycle raids. So we were being flown by 101st Airborne, a Task Force No Mercy, who were flying in UH-60 Black Hawks. I was in the sniper team of the lead aircraft, and for this job we actually had your cousin Scotty Palmer's team, or Pete Rudland's team, which Scotty was in, as a bit of security, because what we realised from Charlie Cott particularly was that our ability to provide commentary and precision fires was really limited because we were constantly looking at the high ground around us. You don't want to be too high because you can't see anything. Yeah. But if you're high enough to see what's going on in the belly, you're also low enough for someone to be behind you. So it's a sort of real predicament. But anyway, so we had Scotty's team with us on that task. So we were flying in. We were going into an area in northern Kandahar, into this village, to do a clearance based off some intelligence. And I'm pretty sure I'd fallen asleep. It had been, like I said, it had been a long night. It was a 45-minute flight. And I actually remember looking at Scotty initially because when we first took off, I think maybe it was about 10 minutes after we took off, there's a seat inside the aircraft, which is the rear starboard seat, we call the hurricane seat, because the right-hand propellers cause this rotor wash that comes in the right side of the aircraft. No one wants to sit in the hurricane seat because you just get whaled by the rotor wash, and it's just miserable, and it's cold at height in northern Kandahar too. So I remember at one stage I was just sitting there whinging at myself about how cold it was and tired it was. You know, the typical digger stuff. You know, SF soldiers aren't immune to whinging, trust me. And I looked over at Scotty, and he pretty much had his head in, I think it was Tim Applin's lap next to him, because he was just trying to get away from the rotor wash. And I remember just looking at him and just laughing, and he shook his head. And mate, so we're flying in, and normally you build these little routines in your head where you get a 5-minute call, and you get up and you go through, you check your gear and all that sort of stuff. And I remember looking out the window and thinking that the horizon wasn't there, because even with the NVGs up, when you look out the sort of port or starboard door of the bird, you can sort of see the horizon line, right?
Yeah.
Even with poor ambient light. And I remember looking out and thinking, well, there's no horizon. And then unbeknownst to me, because I wasn't on the headset, only the team commander was on the internal comm system for the Black Hawk. The loadmaster, Brandon Silk, he said to the pilot on the inter-aircraft intercom, well, we're getting a bit low, aren't we, sir? And then one of the pilots said, I've lost the horizon. Then we impacted at about 270 kilometres an hour, about 3:06, about 3:26 in the morning. I remember the impact. I didn't hear the comms. I didn't have the comms headset, but like I said, this is what came out afterwards in the inquiry. So as far as I was concerned, I was just looking out the window and we impacted.
Wow.
And then it's just, my memories of this are pretty hazy. We all suffered some pretty significant head injuries, but, and it's been sort of hard for me too over the years to what is actually my memory and what I've drawn from my memory and what has been merged and nested with the stories that guys have told me. And, it's been a few years now. So there are some things that are definitely my memory that I remember like they were yesterday. And there's some things I'm not quite sure if they're my memory or what guys have told me. Anyway, so we impacted. Then I just remember just getting thrown around, like just spinning, and then I lost consciousness. And then the next thing I woke up, then one of the guys, Ryan Walker, was holding my neck saying, "You're right, mate, you're right, don't move. You're right, Scott." And I remember thinking, oh, fuck, it must have been a big IED. Yeah. How big was the IED? And he's like, it wasn't an IED, mate, it wasn't an IED. Now, my vivid memories of this is just, fire. So the aircraft caught on fire from where we first impacted to where the crash site was nearly 160 metres.
How fast was it travelling?
It was like 230 kilometres an hour. We're flying at full speed.
Yeah.
Obviously it caught on fire. All the rounds were cooking off. So for those who aren't used to military vernacular, that's basically when you throw a bullet into a fire, it explodes. The projectile doesn't really have enough velocity to cause damage, but it's still can be damage. It can cause damage. So all the bullets in the aircraft were going off. I could hear the choppers. What I now know was the second and third chopper landing, and just dudes just frantic, screaming, just dudes running around. There was a sense of urgency in the air. You knew something was up.
Yeah.
And anyways, from there I was evacuated to Kandahar, where I lost consciousness after my lung collapsed, and then I was moved to Germany. But the one thing that I always like to highlight when I talk about a chopper crash isn't necessarily me. I mean, I didn't really do anything right. I sat in a bird and it crashed, and I was just one of the guys who didn't die. It was just pure luck. Just like all combat, it's luck. But what I think I really want to shed light on is just the remarkable courage and selflessness and quick thinking and resolve and toughness of the boys who landed in second and third chopper, because these guys landed amongst absolute carnage. And instead of just dropping their bundle, instead of losing their shit, instead of just being overcome with what you could argue is one of the most difficult circumstances you'd find. I mean, even for trained paramedics, coming across a mass cas like that would be pretty daunting, right? Those boys just hooked in, There was one core medic, or for the civilian equivalent, a paramedic. The rest of the boys were just SF CFAs. And it was those boys that kept me and the other guys that survived alive, So I think, I owe a lot to those boys. And, and I know some of those guys have suffered horrendously for the fact that they couldn't save some of the guys who died. But once again, you can have those injuries and be on the world's best surgeon's table and you're still going to die, right?
Yeah, so, 100%.
Yeah, mate. So that in a really quick summary was the crash.
Steve Moharic, aka K9 Steve, episode 27. Because you had, that was a pretty heavy trip with what happened as well with the loss of Camp Baird. And, I sort of talking to guys in your unit that I know, you know, that like no one has any bad words about him. It's like everyone speaks of him as one of the top soldiers in the top elite sections, you know, so he was like the best. And, you know, like the day that he died, did you ever get a thought in your mind where you were like, well, shit, if the Taliban can kill our best soldier, our very, very best that Australia's got to give out, what can happen to me?
100%, bro.
Yeah.
You know, you go over there, you train so hard and you're with such competent people that you do have, and you need it. That's a Superman, you know, mentality that we're untouchable. And for most things, we deliberately plan it to be the overwhelming force. That's how we conduct operations. Australia doesn't send people on suicide missions. Even though the Special Forces is pretty much handling all combat, the infantry got very much used as a defensive element, which, you know, it is its own problem, but that's what happened because, you know, my opinion, they don't want to see, people find it very hard to deal with young infantry soldiers dying over more senior, hardened Special Forces soldiers.
I spoke about this recently on a podcast. It's okay for the government to say we've lost another Special Forces guy because that's what they're trained to do.
Yeah.
It wasn't okay for infantry, kids.
Yeah,
kids
that's right.
to
put
die.
a bunch of Special Forces guys next to a bunch of infantry guys, and I mean, they just look different. You know, you've got an older, more weathered group.
Yeah. But politically, it was okay for
Special
Forces soldiers to die, not infantry.
But also, just to the risk reduction, we are far highly trained, more highly
100%.
trained. So the risk there is less. As long as we continue to try and be the overwhelming force, doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes you get ambushed, all that sort of stuff. Anything can happen. But we try to plan to be the overwhelming force. You know, we get intel. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But honest, bro, like when I remember doing the first job after he got unfortunately killed, I felt vulnerable. Yeah. I hadn't felt vulnerable. And I know Scotty Ryder talked about this, that the more you deal with these situations, the better you get at coping with it. It was my first time one of us had been, you know, killed. First time dealing with it. So I remember going out in the next job. I wanted to go out, you know, like, fuck, I'm in a get back on the horse, but also in a revenge mindset. Like, I want to go out and take the fight to them. You know what I mean? They just took one of the most influential, positive, and respected leaders, not only in my platoon, not only in my company, but in the unit, within the Special Forces, within Australian Special Forces community. This was a guy that was elite amongst the elite. You know, you'll never hear anyone say anything bad about him. You know, there's some guys that the Special Forces community can be a little bit like a mixture of prison and school. You know, like you need to, if you show weakness, there are guys that will come after you. You know, because it sort of has to be like that because of what we're tasked to do.
It's a man's world.
Yeah, but he wasn't that guy. You know, he led through fair, you know, a fair and respectful way. And the guys in his team, they looked up to him. You know, they loved him, and he looked after them. You know, and to him to get taken out of the battle space, I'm not the only person that said this within my company, but you know, there was vulnerability after that. You know, it's not going to dictate how I operate, but definitely, bro, like you don't think about dying. If that sounds right. Like,
did you think about dying after he died?
Yeah.
Isn't that wild? That
fleeting. I think just after that job. Yeah. You know, because I got shot at on that job, and I remember I got shot at on that job, and I was just like, you know, like instead of just, and I still ran towards, you know, where we thought we come from. It was just potch. I never even found it. It was very thick greenery. Never even figured out where it came from. But just running towards it, you know, trying to figure out where it was from. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
You know? I'd never felt that until that point.
Isn't that wild though, that one person can have so much influence over a bunch of alpha males, elite alpha males? It probably just showed the respect he had. And what type of figure he was.
It's earned. It's earned. You know, there are guys that are just known as awesome warfighters. You know, some of them through savagery and some of them through just outright competency, but they merge, you know, because they're a necessity in the Special Forces world. You have to be a man that's capable of bringing extreme violence because it's going to come to you.
I remember I only met him once and it was after my cousin's funeral. And I went up to him and he had a MG and I said, well, what'd you get that for? And his response was, if you eat enough Wheat Bix and you collect the tokens and you hand them tokens in, then they give you an orange one. Like, You know what I mean? Like
there are guys, mate. If I had a bravery award, I'd be
but he just, he was just like this. You know,
man.
This is nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what he felt, and
it's
very humble. He was very humble.
A lot of the awards get devalued. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of amazing things that Special Forces guys do that never get acknowledged, because it's almost becomes part of, I won't say every day, because guys are doing amazing things, but, in a different unit, you'd be, held up as it happens, you know what I mean? And some things, people do amazing things, but the right people didn't see it, or there was no one there or whatever, so they don't get acknowledged. So there's some guys that have a very, they're very, I don't know what the word is, he's sort of embarrassed about some of their awards, and I know one of them who felt a little bit like this was the guy that got a Star of Gallantry, which is our second highest military honour, in the same contact that Cam Baird died, and Cam Baird was given the Victoria Cross on that day, which is our highest honour. Unfortunately, it took his death to get that, and in a lot of the ways, I mean, he was given it for what happened, but we in the company and we in the unit also know that it was necessary for him to be acknowledged for who he was. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think even if he didn't do something heroic on that day, we almost owed it to him. He earned it, but I think for all of us, it was like he needs that acknowledgement. And that day was hard, man. That day was hard. We just got pulled into a gunfight, so. We'll talk about what happened, I guess. My team landed pretty far away from a couple of other teams. One of the teams, as we were patrolling through this area, they got contacted. And within that contact, the team leader got hit in the chest and hit in the leg, which was Cam Bair's best friend. So he was the 4-1, so the leader of 4 team. That come over comms that, he's been injured, they're in contact. When there's in contact, we generally run to that contact site. Doesn't matter how far you are away, unless you've got a very specific task you need to be on, you back the boys, And, they ran over, we ran over, we were miles away. And we're running over, and as Cam's team came in to where they were, Cam's team got ambushed. By very, very committed fighters, very, very heavily armed fighters. So they got drawn into an ambush and drawn into a different gunfight. So here we have one guy injured. They've taken care of that situation. I might be remembering this wrong, but hey, I'm telling the story. They've got to get him out of there. So we've got to call a Casavac in and get him to a hospital and all that sort of stuff. While we've got another gunfight going on, while other teams are rushing in. When we didn't know what else was coming, So I was the only guy that day that had a belt-fed machine gun, which is a big, heavy, belt-fed machine gun. So I had 51 kilos of weight above my body running to that contact site. And I just remember thinking, man, this is the time to prove, how capable you are. Keep up with these guys that are carrying 20 kilos and just keep up. And we're running over there. And as we run over there, I got pulled onto a hill as we get closer. It was like a cemetery or something like that above these compounds, and the rest of my team were down low, and I'm up on there because I've got the machine gun so that I can provide, heavy covering fires if I need to. I've got good observation. Well, my team moved through because we still had to clear places to get to this gunfight. We don't know if there's enemy on the way. So as we're going there, one of my teammates yells at me, Steve, stop! And I stop on the hill, and he just bang, bang, bang. And I come down, he calls me down, and there was a dude waiting for me. So he was going to, as I come off the hill, he was in an alleyway, and he was going to shoot me as I came into that alleyway. And I like to tell this guy, no, he was already dead, one of the other. But he might have saved my life. I don't know. But we continued on to then support Cam's team in this gunfight. And what had happened is these Taliban had pulled themselves into a compound which was about the size of 2 shipping containers internally, maybe less, maybe 1, but a square. Very thick mud walls that you can't shoot through. They're the ultimate cover. And it only had 2 small windows and a main entryway. So they were literally close enough to the Taliban to touch them. One of them even pulled the weapon off when he stuck it out the door and pulled the weapon off the Taliban. But there were 6 fighters, I think, and engaging the boys through a doorway with the boys engaging back. And I got put on a top of a roof, which was about 50 to 100 metres from the contact. They were in like a green belt at the bottom, green belt being like just where the creek is and all the greenery, the trees, and because everything else is arid, And I'm up on this hill and I'm facing down the most likely where the reinforcements are going to come. But what this put me in a position to do was, while everyone else was drawn into a gunfight and shooting and helping out, I was listening. You know what I mean? And I remember the moment when it come over comms, they're like, 3-1 is KIA. And there was just a moment pause, and then the comms just keep rolling, right? Because all that happens, it's a fucking shit situation, but guess what? Next guy takes his place. His 2IC steps up. Boom, you're now the team leader. It's not like, this ain't a game. Someone gets shot. No, stop. We've got someone injured.
You don't just respawn.
That's it. This is life or death, and it continues until it's over. And however long that takes is however long it takes. Doesn't matter about your feelings, right? And that's the world. It might sound silly, but I think some people don't understand how real it is.
How so final it can be.
That's it, man. And I remember one of my big takeaways from that day is how it doesn't matter how boys were feeling, they just stepped up. Do you know what I mean? And this is what happens in the special forces it's not that we're Jedis, right? We are just so good at the basics that they come naturally. No one has to check you for the basics. No one has to make sure that you're carrying something or doing something. It comes naturally. So natural that if you're feeling a type of way, that fight or flight comes in, it's overrun by your training. So even if you do feel a certain way, you go into autopilot for the correct things.
Training works.
That's right. That's right. And because we're so good at the basics, we can then further our training because no one has to keep you in check for that, right? And you see that happen when something like that happened. You know what I mean? It just everything kept moving. Everyone kept moving. And Cam had died because he tried to draw their gunfire for us to achieve a break-in that doorway and unfortunately took a round. At the bad situation, it is what it is, but the gunfight still has to be won. Not only that, we still have to get out of here. You know what I mean? And it was hot, man. It was hot. I do remember that. I think we had one of the snipers go down as a heat casualty as well. And then afterwards at the cleanup, I remember going back down to where they were. So I had to help, get the bodies out. We've got to take fingerprints and photos and stuff to see if these people are on any sort of database, if they're high value people, you know what I mean? Because that matters. So every single death, if you can, is recorded. There's a database for this. And we go down, do all that, clean up the site and stuff. I just remember being down there and hearing the stories of people. And one of my mates was just he was almost in a state of shock, and he came over to me and we sat in security with each other and he was sort of just rambling about what was sort of going on. And I just sort of settled him and everything. But even though we were peers, I looked up to him and I don't know, I was really taken back by this sort of a bit of shock that he was experiencing sort of thing. But, even then he's still able to function. Yeah. He can still do that. If we kicked off, he would have, boom,
went back into work
That's
mode.
Right. That's right. And
isn't that amazing that the highest level, most elite people trained in the military can have them small moments, right? That was probably a senior guy.
Yeah.
But like you just said, if someone started shooting again, not their natural instincts, but their training kicks back in.
Yeah.
And it's okay, we've got a situation here, we need to fix it.
Yeah.
And that's what you go back into.
Yeah, man.
It's wild.
It is, man.
Wild that you can be programmed like that.
Yeah.
Well, not programmed, but trained in such a high level, such a high risk environment, such a high stakes environment, right? And you just lost one of your best soldiers, the most looked up to guys, and people are emotionally starting to freak out. That guy was obviously in a bit of shock, but if it kicked off again,
no problem. I didn't think that I couldn't depend on him. Do you know what I mean? And it was I don't know, bro. It was horrible, right? But at the same time, it just, I saw that the machine work how it's supposed to work.
Dr. Dan Pronk, episode 28.
So certainly 2011 for me was the big year, the big tour, and lots of fighting, lots of experiences there. Sadly, the first experience that I had losing teammates, responding to teammates in a medical capacity and not being able to save them. We hadn't lost anyone in my first tour.
Yeah.
So with hindsight, I think I did come back with a bit of a false impression of the risk, if you like.
Yeah.
And that was certainly shattered in my second tour.
Yeah.
And then did a couple more after that. But I think, you're right, that 2011 period for me was definitely the most kinetic.
Yeah. Was it really, really tough to to bounce back after you lost someone over there, especially from being a medic role.
Yeah.
You know, was that just hard losing guys? Because did you sort of, was there a point where you ever blamed yourself for it, for losing guys?
Oh, no question. And I think that's human nature to second guess every decision you've made when something hasn't gone well, particularly when you're the responder, you know, on the spot, who everyone's looking to try and save this person, and it doesn't go well. I think it's human nature to play all the what ifs and run it on loop in your mind. And certainly, sadly, on that 2011 trip, we lost 3 in pretty quick succession. And so there was a lot of that rumination. Interestingly, and only on reflection, it was remarkably easy to stay functional despite these things happening. And I think that related mostly to the pace of the role and the constant distraction. So you would do a job, you'd have these bad outcomes where not everyone came home, but then there was immediately another job to plan for. And so it was quite easy to stay moving forward and not stop and really reflect.
Yeah.
And so, I think that was very protective with hindsight.
And I talk about this all the time, especially with ex-Special Forces guys, even infantry guys as well. It's obviously done for a reason, right, to continuously keep you moving and continuously keep you going out to the next job. So you don't really have time to stop and think about what just happened. You just got to plan for the next job.
Yeah.
And I read an interesting report it was from the US military, about that importance of getting guys out after they've just suffered a casualty or, you know, something really bad happened, to continuously get them moving and getting them out again. Because if they stop, they think, and then one person might not want to go out next time if they've got 3 or 4 days to dwell on it. And then that one person becomes 2 people, 3 people, and it just gets an infection within the group, and not a lot of people want to go out of that. So the importance to keep people rolling over. But the flip side of that is, when they get home, they don't have time to process it, and they haven't had time to process it overseas. So you see much worse effects years and years on, which a lot of people do have issues with. Every single person that's military and that has been through stuff over in Afghan, we always talk about this, and it just organically comes up. But unfortunate event that happens overseas, but you know, the importance to keep moving for the overall aspect of the job, you know, is quite high on the list for a lot of blokes, that they say, you know, that's what they need to do.
Yeah, look, I agree. And I don't think there's any, there's no easy answer to this. Exactly as you say, there still is a job to do. The task group's there to do a job. And so you can't just down tools because you've lost a person, as devastating as that is. But equally, I think to your point, there is certainly, from a psychological perspective, there's benefits to keeping people close to the role and managing them, certainly in country. It is interesting. As I said, it was very protective with hindsight. And I think for all of the blokes, I don't think there was ever that hint of, we don't want to do this anymore. If anything, it doubled people's resolve to keep doing the job. And I think that at times needed to be tempered so that you're staying, trying to remove emotion from what you're doing in the role, because obviously if you've got too much emotion in the role, you might be making decisions that aren't in alignment with the task group's objectives. But but as you say, these things don't go away. You might think they do. You can bury them for a certain period of time and maybe pour alcohol on them for a while, but those demons have a tendency to come back out at some point.
Toope, episode 29.
I was on the computer. I think I was speaking to my partner at the time, and anytime anything went wrong, the internet went straight off.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which you guys have spoken about. Obviously, to stop the media, you know, sending stuff home.
Or leaking stuff out.
They always leak stuff, but they always did anyway, which made it worse for people at home. So the internet went off. So straight away, everyone's talking in the room. Fuck, what's going on? Something's going on? Is your internet off? Yep. So we knew. And then next thing, boom, 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 on our door. And it was my corporal. And we opened. He's like, get your fucking shit on. Get down to the choppers. So straight away, we knew there's obviously something wrong. Because QRF, usually with QRF, there's different times with QRF. They might give you 4 hours. It could be QRF in an hour. This one was we're going. So we went down, and then we got down there, and then our boss was down there. And I don't know if you've spoken about it, but the way that they speak over there is Cat Alpha, Cat Bravo, Cat Charlie. So unless you're a doctor, you actually can't say someone's dead. So they speak in that term. Cat alpha, usually they say cat alpha, no signs of life. So he's gone three cat alpha, no signs of life, few cat bravo, few cat Charlie. So imagine hearing that, like 3 cat alpha, no signs of life.
Basically in your head, 3 dead.
3 are dead. And so straight away you're thinking that's your mate. You go straight to the worst thing. And the day before I had breakfast with those boys. So they were at Taran Cat before they went out to a hib. And so literally 24 hours before I was sitting there having breakfast with them, laughing. And so straight away I was thinking, who's gone, blah, blah, blah. So they sent the first QRF out on the chopper. We ended up going out in the vehicles early that morning. I was lucky enough to be able to call my partner at the time before we left. I remember I got about 10 seconds on the phone. I called her. I was like, you're going to hear that there's 3 Australians dead. It's not me. I'll speak to you in about 2 weeks. And then hung up. She was just crying. And then, we went out. So...
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know Frenchie spoke about this, which is something I'll never forget. But just the look on their faces when we got there, they were. I remember getting there. We got out of the vehicle, and like Frenchie touched on this last in his podcast. That just that look, and I remember they were sitting against the FOB. And like, me, I'm a bit of a joker, and, like that. So I come up, trying to say hello, and to be honest, they looked like, the way that I'd put it is like they were frozen in time. And to be honest, there's probably a few of them that are probably still in that moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where they probably never leave that moment, which makes me sad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And looking at those faces, I'll never forget that. They just
had that 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah, they were dead inside.
Yeah.
They were dead inside, some of them boys.
Yeah.
And I know, Frenchie's doing well, and a few of the others, but I know there's some that aren't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I remember, so we went in, obviously took over from those boys because obviously they had it fucking pretty rough that night. And then we went in, there's all blood on the ground. It had all been cleaned up by then. RS was there, which he spoke about. And then, I think he spoke about what RS said as well, which was, I think got it, like, sort of fucking pumped us all up. What he because he'd gone down and locked all the weapons away and sort of taken control of that situation, him and his crew.
Yeah.
But then they had, I think they had their prime minister or their fucking whatever they call them, and then the interpreter, and he was pretty much like, tell them that we've locked the weapons away. If anyone wants to get them, I'll fucking take everyone out here. You know what I mean? And then he flew out. We stayed there. We took over. Remember, we took over one of the pickets, and then we just took over. But just I'll never forget getting out that vehicle and walking up to that wall, and it was funny because it's something that it's obviously everything's perception of your reality, but just hearing Frenchie speak about that, because it's just something that I seen, and not knowing that maybe other people didn't see it or they might have seen something different, but he touched on that. So just to know that that's how it was.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
Jeff Cassin, episode 31.
But we were on this massive clearing operation of like the Chora Valley, and we'd had a Benny and his section attached to us. So we were only working with him. We'd worked with him for about a week, 10 days, and then we lost him for another section in the company. Anyway, the day before, we were talking, and he was the driver of a Bushmaster. So one RAR decided to crew as many of the vehicles as they can. They got a lot of guys Bushmaster qualified and supervisor qualified. But Benny was one of those guys who was always super keen to get on the ground and be an infantryman. That was his job. He wasn't super keen on being in the Bushmaster. He didn't see it, like you can imagine, similar like you were talking before about the footy player doesn't really man the field. So, he was super keen to get out and sort of park the vehicles up in a patrol base and get out on the ground and do his job. But to his credit, also, he would ask us things about vehicle husbandry and talk to the other Cav guys that were manning the Bushmasters about how to better look after his vehicle. Did we have any tips or tricks to pass on to him that made life easier for him as the Bushmaster driver for his section? Now, that's the sort of dude he was, you know?
Yeah.
So we lost him, like we lost them, that section to the company. And literally the next morning, I remember, you know, we'd had Ravelli and I was in the turret of my vehicle and I was cleaning my Mag 58 flex machine gun. I was just sitting there and I had the vehicle was turned on and I had my vehicle, my crew headset, my helmet just turned right up and I was just listening to the radio, like just the comms. And next thing I know is this fucking huge boom. I heard it from down the valley and it echoed up the valley. And I don't know, did you get up to Chora at all?
Nah.
No. So Chora is kind of like a bowl, big bowl. And this blast, the sound of the blast echoed around the bowl, did like a full lap and came back to us. And I remember looking at Nick, who was my crew commander, I went, shit, that was a big one, man. And next minute the comms just went berserk. And we're hearing contact, we're hearing this, we're hearing that. Instinctively, like all of us in the patrol base we're in, we're getting cams on, we're getting armor on, we're getting ready to start up, we're getting ready to roll out. And I don't think we ended up rolling out until later that afternoon, but it came over very quickly that that Benny had been killed as a result of that blast. And your heart just sinks. Like, he's like, shit, I spoke to him yesterday, you know, like, oh, fuck. And then, you know, the whole combat team and the whole battle group consolidates back in Tarankout and you do the ramp ceremony. And so we get tasked to prepare the vehicle that will take Benny to his service and then from the service to the C-130. So we stay up till about 3 o'clock in the morning cleaning an ASLAV personnel carrier variant to the point where we're replacing the headlights and the tail lights so they look new, to the point where we didn't like how it looked after like a basic truck wash and whatever else. So we're painting it, spray paint, to make it look as shiny and new as we possibly can. Like, you know, what else can you do?
Yeah.
You know, you just want it to be look as best as possible for Benny because he deserves that.
Yeah.
So that was a real kick in the teeth. But, you know, the war doesn't stop. And, you know, a couple of days later, we were out on task again. And the mission continues. So, we just roll on, keep things going. And, as deployments kind of tend to do, like one task just blended into another, another find, another IED find, another IED strike. It's like, okay, cool. You just kind of feels like you're going through the motions. Like you've done this so many times that you just it's almost insignificant. It's just something that happens. Something like, okay, we've had a strike. Yep, bring forward the heavy wreckers, bring forward the recovery assets, get the engineers out doing their thing. Oh, the IED recovery team wants to come out and inspect the blast site and pick up any evidence. It's just normal. And I suppose that's one of the big takeaways about deployments, and one of the negative things, I suppose, about what becomes your new normal isn't really normal.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's probably one of those things where guys kind of have troubles with when they get back home, is because that normal doesn't really fit what's supposed to be normal.
Hemmo de Vries, episode 32.
We talked about my sort of first deployment and things went pretty well on that. Like it was really good. And then the winter deployment was pretty cruisy. There was a couple of incidents on the backside of that were fairly traumatic for me personally. And then 2011 was really kinetic, and it was like, I think Dan spoke about it and a few other people might have spoken about it. But after that deployment, I started to unravel a little bit.
Yeah.
And I definitely noticed that. I went on a Europe trip with 3 of my mates from Charlie Company, 2 Commando, and we sort of just went and partied through Europe for 3 or 4 weeks. But just obliterating myself every night, every day, every night, and just getting on these mad big benders and stuff. And then came home and had to sort of right the ship and then get back on course. And I managed to do that. But I remember at that time thinking to myself, man, I'm not not well. Like I'm never at 100%, but I was like, man, I'm definitely not running at even 80+%. Like I felt like there was something sort of didn't feel right. And I sort of became aware of it, didn't do anything about it. And then after the fourth rotation in 2013, come back from that and sort of Afghanistan had wrapped up.
Yeah.
Then I sort of took some time off, which I'd planned in advance to take some leave without pay because I really needed it because I was burned out. It ended up being pretty detrimental because as soon as I got away from that structure and away from having the purpose and having that next thing on the list, that next domino that I needed to fall.
Yeah, like we've spoken about.
Yeah, the next target to hit, I started to really unravel. Anyway, so I went and sought help after a couple of pretty concerning incidents. Went and sought help and went down the path of speaking to the psychs at work, and then I got put with a specialist out in Cronulla, and I would see her a couple of times a week. And a psychiatrist prescribed me some pretty hardcore sort of, they're drugs, prescription drugs.
Yeah.
But I took one day and it zonked me, man. Like it really knocked me around and it made me, I have the ability to completely compartmentalize my emotions anyway, like completely turn them off almost.
Yeah.
And my wife hates it.
Well, you've probably been trained to do that, right?
Yeah, and I was always a bit like that.
Yeah,
I've always just been out of who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty ruthless with that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking to myself, mate, that's literally just shut me down completely. And I did not like the way that it made me feel. And also, I think the underlying thing with my training and my fitness and my background, outside work and my lifestyle and the way that I like to approach my health and fitness is a bit more natural. And when I say natural, I mean natural therapies and stuff like that. So I sort of was starting to lean towards that sort of stuff. And then, so basically I decided that I wasn't going to take any of the prescription medication, and I didn't. Yeah. And I didn't tell anyone that. And I started to go through going and seeing the psychs and going through this whole process to try and talk about all these incidents and essentially try and take their power away by analysing and communicating them and sort of taking, like, sort of removing that monkey off your back.
Yeah.
And during that period, I did actually use THC and CBD oil.
Yeah.
With really good effect.
Yeah.
And I absolutely swear by it. And I did some psilocybin, like mushroom psilocybin, like liquid psilocybin, like microdosing, which I was getting from a couple of mates of mine who sort of knew a lot about it. And some dimethyltryptamine, some like DMT, like really low level DMT sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And it had a pretty big impact for me.
Yeah.
Like, and I sort of, there's key moments when I was sort of moving through, and like I was doing a lot of the other things, like the mindfulness stuff, the breathing, making sure I was going for a walk every morning, still trying to train.
Yeah.
Thank God for that, because the fact that I love to train every day, and a bit like yourself and probably a lot of people that might listen to this, like that's my outlet.
Yeah,
like I need
time.
that.
Yeah.
So when I was going through probably the deepest, darkest parts of my mental health journey, which I'm still on, we're all still on it. But at that time, just continuing to train and force myself to go and dunk myself in the cold ocean every morning and stuff was a massive blessing. But there's other little elements along the way, and that discussion that we had earlier sort of made me think about that. I was like, you know what, like the CBD oil and some of the THC stuff that I was using, and then some of the other psychedelic stuff really had a positive impact.
Yeah.
In small amounts and at the right times. Was sort of pivotal in my recovery.
Yeah.
And I've never really spoken about it, to be honest.
Cory Neill, episode 33.
Mate, this is one thing I won't forget.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was a CFA, so it's basically, mate, I was just stopping the bleeding and keeping it breathing, basically. So, mate, we'd been out that day, been out on patrol, and I remember we didn't get too far. We found an IED. It was a pretty big IED. The Americans came, blew it in place, and it would have been a lot of casualties from that IED. So we found that little patrol successful. We came back, and it was whatever time it was dark, and we're all just relaxing in our little area. We're pretty comfortable, all the boys, we're all pretty close by this time, and
Yeah, Frenchie said you were doing weights or something like that.
Yeah.
Doing a workout.
Mate, because I was a carpenter before the military, so I had built like a heave beam to the height of the HESCO wall. So you could, go on top of the vehicles. So when we'd stop somewhere, it would go on top of the HESCO wall and, so we could keep training, Yeah. Always got to stay fit, stay in shape. And, but anyway, we're training with a few local boys too. And we're just chilling out, and all of a sudden it was just chaos. Chaos erupted. You know what I mean? It's dark, and mate, we're pretty new to war. You know what I mean? Like here are the SF boys and that, and they multiple tours. You know, so much respect to them, but mate, we're lids when it comes in, to war.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden there's just there's all this firing going on, and I had a bit of a machine gunner mentality, and my first thought was deflate fire, right? So I just basically simply put, I thought it was just raining rounds.
Yeah.
So someone back of a hill was just raining rounds.
Yeah, just putting pot shots.
So no kind of dramas.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of firing. And so it got pretty real pretty quick when you turn around and then see the casualties, because it all happened so fast. And then I remember, because I had the combat first aid skills, I remember doing a little bit of a triage. And I remember one of the boys had been shot in his back, and then, basically about 100 mil above that, exit wound.
Yeah.
So I was lucky to basically did a U-turn and came out, and mate, he was really, really lucky. But he was quite comfortable and relaxed. So I kind of like kept him comfortable. And I think the other boys treated him, but unfortunately, another one of our friends kind of came in, tripped over, and he unfortunately saw him say his last words and rolled him over. So I was trying to find an entry wound, couldn't find an entry wound, but the exit wound, from my experiences, are always the worst. So unfortunately, basically it's kind of over his heart. And mate, I've rolled my friend over, heard his last words, rolled my friend over, and I'm looking into his chest, looking at his heart, and I'm like, mate, I'm just this little cheeky surfy kid from Manly. You know what I mean? And then I've got this scenario put in front of me, and I'm like, okay, I've got to work now,
Yeah.
So, we did what we could there, and I just remember it being surreal, but I just remember all the boys just going into action. You know what I mean? Everyone just played their part, did what they had to do.
Yeah.
Very hands-on. I remember, the injuries were so severe. I remember having to give CPR and, obviously patch all the wounds. It was just blood everywhere. And then I remember having to carry the boys out, to the choppers, getting evacuated. And just before that, quickly, I remember just trying to get, because I remember when we were doing CPR, I was just getting mouthful of blood and spew and
over you.
On me, in my mouth. Yeah. And, but that's what you're doing for the boys, you do anything to try and keep them alive. And I remember so vividly, I remember just getting a nasopharyngeal out just to try and give some kind of airway as we're walking.
Yeah.
I remember just using the blood as lube, it was just so surreal, and sticking this big tube down my mate's nose that's lying there lifeless. And then I remember the choppers coming in, a couple of Black Hawks come in, and we're running them out to the choppers. And I just remember covering the boys' faces just because it was so intense. Mate, like I said, this time that they had all they were gone.
Yeah.
But still, we're covering their faces, we're giving breaths, we're doing all those things because they're your mates. And I remember just passing them to the chopper, and just, mate, we were rattled.
Yeah.
And then pretty much from then, it was mate, it was still, mate, you can't just go home after that. So it was I remember my personal camera, I had to actually go around and take kind of photos of the scene. And, and one thing that sticks out in my mind is the desert soaks up water. It's so hot over there, and the desert just soaks up water like that. Mate, there's blood everywhere. We were covered in blood. You know what I mean? It was just, the scene was brutal. The scene was surreal. I think it was 24 of us, 5 shot, 3 dead.
Yeah.
The other injuries were pretty catastrophic.
Yeah.
But it's surreal, mate. To like I said, just this little cheeky little blonde surfy kid, and then all of a sudden my mate's in front of me lying there, you know, and I won't mention his last words, but literally said his last words looking at us. And yeah, to see all that, mate, it's just, yeah, I just feel like the mind's not meant to see that.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And for more information, head over to our Instagram at 2 Worlds Collide Podcast. Take care.